Hi, and welcome to the third section, Building Template-Driven and Reactive Forms. In the previous section, we looked at conquering components and directives. In this section, we will initiate with implementing simple two-way data binding with ngModel and basic field validation with a form control. Then we will move on to bundling controls with a form group and form controls with a form array. Post that, we will be implementing basic forms with ngForm, form builder, and form control name. Lastly, we will be creating and using a customer validator and a custom asynchronous validator with promises. Now we move on to the first video of this section that deals with implementing simple two-way data binding with ngModel. In this video, we will be adding the directive to the application module, and then we will be fleshing out component. Finally, we will look into binding the event and property. Forms are an important elemental construct for nearly every web application, and they have been reimagined for the better in Angular 2. Angular 1 forms were very useful, but they were totally dependent on the convention of ngModel. Angular 2's newfound conventions remove it from the ngModel dependence and offer a fresh approach to form and information management that ultimately feels cleaner and more approachable. Fundamentally, it is important to understand where and why forms are useful. There are many places in an application where multitudinous input demands association, and forms are certainly useful in this context. Angular 2 forms are best used when validating the said input, especially so when multiple field and cross-field validation is required. Additionally, Angular forms maintain the state of various form elements, allowing the user to reason the history of an input field. It is also critical to remember that the Angular 2 form behavior, much in the same way as its event and data binding, is getting integrated with the already robust browser form behavior. Browsers are already very capable of submitting data, recalling data upon a page reload, simple validation, and other behaviors that pretty much all forms rely on. Angular 2 doesn't redefine these, rather, it integrates with these behaviors in order to link in other behaviors and data that are part of either a framework or your application. Before we proceed, you should know one thing. In this video, be aware of the duality of the use of Forms module and Reactive Forms module. They behave very differently and are almost always used separately when it comes to form construction. Angular 2 still has two-way data binding, but the way it behaves is a bit different than what you're used to. This video will begin with a very simple example and then break it down into pieces to describe what it's actually doing. The code, links, and a live example related to this video are available at this link, ngcookbook.hero.qapp.com. Now, let's see how to do it. Two-way data binding uses the ngModel directive, which is included in Forms module. Add this directive to your application module. Here I created a file and named it app.module.ts, which we will be using in this video. Next, flesh out your component, which will have two instances of input bound to the same component member using ngModel. Here's another file that we have named as article.editor.component.ts file. There's one more file which we need. I've named this one as index.html file. We'll need this to display the ngModel. This is the article editor tag that is included in the file. We also need the main.ts file. This is the file where we are importing Platform Browser Dynamic and App module. Then we have a system-config.js file. That is all we require. You should see input modification instantly reflected in the other input, as well as in h2 tag itself. As we have already discussed in the earlier videos about how to get connected to the local host by running commands in CMD, so now let's connect to the local host. As you enter the URL and connect, you will see this output. Superb! Now let's see how these codes work. What you're really doing is binding to the event and property that ngModel associates with this input. When the component's title member changes, the input is bound to that value and will update its own value. When the input's value changes, it emits an event which ngModel will bind to and extract the value from before propagating it in the component's title member. Note that the banana in a box syntax is simply indicative of the binding done to both the input property with square brackets and the input events with parenthesis. In reality, this is shorthand for this code, so we have created this file, article.editor.component.ts file. Here we need to make a few modifications, like after title, we need to add ngModel change within parenthesis, and in double quotes, write title is equal to $event. Again, we need to add the same tag in the next line of code. Now, save this file. You will find that this behaves identically to what we discussed before. Now we can compile index.html and view the output on the local host. As you can see, the output remains the same. The code we modified was only the alternative to the above program. There's more to explore. You might still find that there's a bit too much syntactical sugar happening here for your taste. You're binding to ngModel, but somehow it's equivalent to the input value. Similarly, you're binding to ngModel change events, which are all emitting a $event that appear to be only a string. This is indeed correct. The ngModel directive understands what it is part of and is able to integrate ngModel and ngModel change correctly to associate the desired bindings. Here's what the core of these bindings is essentially doing. So here we have an article-editor.component.ts file, where we need to add target in the code. In this file, we are going to replace ngModel change with input, and after event, we need to add .target.value. We need to make the same changes in the next input tag. In the export class, we need to add a statement, initialize title, otherwise you'll get undefined. Also, you need to modify the title string, as I do it here. Now let's save the file and connect to the local host server and compile index.html program. Here is the output. The output remains the same, as this is only an alternative code for getting the same output. Cool! In this video, we have learned how to implement simple two-way data binding with ngModel.